Welcome back, deep divers. Have you ever grappled with questions so profound they seem to challenge, well, the very fabric of existence? Or even our understanding of God? Today, we're taking a journey into the mind of a philosopher who wasn't afraid to dive right into those abysses, exploring the dynamic, often paradoxical nature of the divine. This isn't just about abstract ideas. It's about understanding the very pulse of reality.
Indeed. We're embarking on a deep dive into the profound philosophical thought of Friedrich Wilhelm Joseph von Schelling. We're drawing primarily from his dense yet incredibly rich work, Die Weltalter, or The Ages of the World. Our source material today offers, a really unique lens into his ideas on the nature of God, freedom, time, the formation of the world, and morality. It reveals a universe that is far more alive, engaged, and even, you could say, struggling than conventional thought might suggest.
Okay, so if you're looking to gain knowledge quickly but thoroughly, maybe have those aha moments without feeling overwhelmed, and connect with some surprising facts, you're definitely in the right place. Consider this your shortcut to understanding Schelling's complex universe, a universe that's, frankly, far more alive and dynamic than you might expect. We're going to extract the most important nuggets, helping you understand what's truly essential in these challenging yet deeply rewarding philosophical ideas. Okay, let's unpack this and see what truly shifts our perspective.
Right. We often imagine the divine as, a realm of pure tranquility, an unmoving, perfectly serene entity, completely beyond suffering or change. But Schelling introduces us to a startling concept right from the start. Divine mourning, or Traurigkeit. And this isn't just human sadness, like a fleeting emotion we experience. He describes it as a profound, foundational, divine mourning in which all earthly pain is immersed.
Divine mourning.
And what's truly fascinating here, and perhaps counterintuitive, is that he presents this as the single right and happy state of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a temporary condition, but an essential, maybe even joyful aspect of the divine nature.
That's a truly radical thought right off the bat. I mean, most of us instinctively shy away from pain, right? We see it as something to be avoided. But here, Schelling suggests that pain is not merely a human experience, something unfortunate or, a flaw in creation. He calls it something universal and necessary in all life, the unavoidable transition point to freedom. That's huge. He even describes the primordial being, that first possibility of God externally manifesting, as being in a state of suffering that comes from growth. So we're talking about a kind of cosmic growing pains, a foundational struggle that isn't a defect, but maybe a necessary engine of development. This really upends our usual assumptions about a perfect, impassive God.
Precisely. This suffering, you see, is not a flaw in God, nor a sign of imperfection. Instead, Schelling views it as universal, extending even to the Creator, and crucially, it's the path to glory. This implies a God who is not static, completely impassible, or eternally complete in a passive sense, but rather one who is actively growing, developing, and experiencing the very essence of life, including its difficulties and transformations.
Path to glory.
Exactly. This fundamentally challenges conventional notions of divine impassibility, where God is often conceived as beyond all suffering. For Schelling, this divine mourning is the very ground of movement and becoming like a compressed spur holding immense potential. It's the deep internal tension that drives all subsequent unfolding.
Okay, so if God has this inherent suffering or tension as part of its growth, but then if God, in another sense, is purest love, infinite communicativity and emanation, always pouring itself out, how does that reconcile with the idea of a distinct individual self-contained existence? Love, by its nature, wants to give, to share. How does an overflowing communicative force also establish itself as a unique, singular entity? This seems to be an inherent deep tension right there.
It is. And what's truly insightful here is how Schelling addresses this fundamental paradox. He argues that love, by its very nature, does not seek its own, and therefore cannot be that which has being with regard to itself. Imagine like an ocean that just continuously flows outwards. It wouldn't have boundaries or a distinct form, would it?
No, it just dissipates.
Right. For love to exist as its own, as a distinct entity, it needs an equivalently eternal force of selfhood, of egoity, which he also calls ipseity or particularity. Without this counterforce, this internal resistance, love would simply dissipate into everything, lacking any distinct form. God, as supreme being, is for itself groundless and born by nothing. In its pure, unadulterated form, love is actually the antithesis of personality. It requires something to resist it, to hold it in place, for distinct selfhood to emerge.
So personality needs something to push against. Wow. So to become a conscious, existing personality, God needs this opposing force, this ipseity or particularity, which we might, in human terms see as a form of self-assertion or maybe even selfishness. But here, it's not about an external force acting on God, but an internal fundamental tension within the Godhead itself, between this infinite overflowing love and the essential need for a distinct, self-contained identity. It's a profound insight into the very nature of selfhood, divine or otherwise, suggesting that identity isn't just given, but actively forged through internal dynamics.
This leads us directly to Schelling's idea of an eternal antithesis within God. Humans, as you noted, often have a natural predilection for the affirmative, the outpouring, the yes. We prefer light, expansion, clarity, ease. But Schelling highlights the equally essential, often unsettling no, the inhibiting, conflicting force that resists the yes, the darkening that resists the light, the obliquity that resists the straight.
The no.
Yes. He's pointing to a fundamental duality that isn't a defect, but an integral, active part of existence. Historically, many philosophers have tried to eliminate this negating principle, seeking pure unity, but Schelling insists it's crucial. It's the very tension that makes for life.
And this isn't just poetic language, is it? Or a simple moral dichotomy between good and evil. He sees this duality manifested in the primordial beginnings of nature itself, in concepts like light and darkness, masculine and feminine, spiritual and corporeal. It's not something that just appears later in the world, like a consequence of creation, but rather a fundamental doubling that has come down through many stages to what appears to us. So these fundamental oppositions are baked into the very fabric of reality from its earliest, most divine manifestations, giving it its energetic, dynamic quality.
Yeah, exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, philosophers throughout history often tried to annihilate this antithesis at its source, to resolve all contradiction into a harmonious unity from the outset. But Schelling insists this is essential. Modern idealism, for instance, in denying this negating primordial force, reduces God to an empty infinite.
An empty infinite.
Yes, it strips the divine of the very tension that gives it life and definition. For Schelling, God must have something within itself that cuts itself off from itself, making itself finite to itself. This isn't an imperfection. Rather, it is a condition for perfection, for true self-actualization and consciousness. Without this internal no, the yes would be boundless and formless, unable to manifest anything distinct. Think of it like a sculptor needing the resistance of the stone to bring a form into being, or an artist needing both the light and shadow to create depth.
Okay, that makes sense. So if we have this yes and no within God, these internally affirming and negating forces, how do they actually relate to each other? You mentioned Schelling introduces a profound concept, a triad of principles in God's necessary nature, an irresolvable concatenation. How does this triad operate without collapsing into just a simple duality or, a static unity? It sounds like a complex dance of powers.
It is complex. He describes three powers: a negating potency, let's call it B, that's the force of selfhood or contraction; an affirming potency, A, the force of love or expansion; and the unity of both, A. Now, each of these has an equal claim to be that which has being. They are equipotent and equally original.
Okay, equal claim.
However, here's the crucial contradictory part. They reciprocally exclude each other from being what has being at the same time. If one is truly manifesting as being, then the opposed can only be in a state of not being, or let's say potential. It's not that they cancel each other out, but that they can't simultaneously be the dominant expression of reality.
But wait, then the unity, AA, also excludes the antithesis, A and B, and vice versa. If the unity is what has being, the opposites can't be, and if the opposites are what has being, the unity can't be. That sounds like a logical impossibility, like a kind of internal gridlock. How can they all exist if they keep excluding each other and can't occupy the same existential space simultaneously? It feels like a logical knot that most philosophy would try to untangle and resolve.
And this is precisely Schelling's audacious point. It's where his thinking truly diverges. God's first nature is in necessary contradiction. It's not by chance. It's posited at the same time with its being, and hence is itself its being. The contradiction isn't an external problem for God to solve, but the very essence of God's primordial nature. It's the engine, not the flaw.
The engine.
Yes. Think of it like the alternating current that powers our modern world.
Yeah.
It's a constant rhythmic reversal, a contradiction and flow, but it's precisely that dynamic tension that generates power and light.
Right. I think most people, myself included, have an aversion to contradiction. It forces us out of, as Schelling says, cozy repose. It demands resolution, or at least a choice. But Schelling argues that without the contradiction, there would be no movement, no life, and no progress. If everything were always in harmony, always just one without any internal opposition, it would be an eternal rigidity without progress, a deathly slumber of all forces. That's a powerful statement about the nature of reality itself, that inherent tension is not just unavoidable, but absolutely vital for anything to truly be and become. It's almost like the universe needs that internal friction to generate the spark of life.
Exactly. The contradiction, then, is not a problem to be solved and eliminated. It's the fundamental power mechanism in what is innermost of life, the very fountain of eternal life. Schelling even declares that the highest task of science is the construction of this contradiction, not its demolition, but its understanding and articulation. This means embracing the dynamic, restless core of existence, divine and otherwise, as the source of all vitality and creation.
Okay, so given that each principle in God's necessary nature wants to be that which has being, and they reciprocally exclude each other from doing so simultaneously, Schelling argues the only solution is an alternating positing. One is what has being, then the other is. This results in an eternally expiring and an eternally recommencing life. So it's not a static resolution, but a ceaseless, dynamic oscillation, a cosmic rhythm of becoming.
Yes, precisely. And this decision, though unprethinkable, happens blindly in God's nature. It's not a conscious, deliberate choice in a human sense, but an inherent primordial mechanism. He notes that the negating force, the force of self-restriction, is often the initiating power. God first restricts itself, denies itself, withdraws its essence from the outside, and retreats into itself. It sounds like an act of self-limitation, a kind of divine inhalation before the exhalation.
A divine breath.
You could say that. This internal clockwork is, for Schelling, the fundamental rhythm of the divine. It's eternally commencing, eternally becoming, always devouring itself, and always again giving birth to itself. This continuing self-restriction of God into a self is what he calls the ongoing event of revelation. It's how God manifests, not through a single act, but a continuous process of self-limitation and renewal, a perpetually unfolding story.
Okay, bringing this back to our earlier discussion about love and selfhood. Schelling identifies this essential resisting principle within God as its personality. This gives us a concrete understanding of how God's individuality emerges from these primordial tensions, this internal struggle.
He asserts that personality is the ultimate act or the ultimate potency by which an intelligent being exists in an incommunicable fashion. It's the real might in God, an irrational principle at work in the first existence which resists confrontation.
Irrational. Interesting.
Yes. Irrational in the sense of resisting simple rationalization. This principle is crucial because it eternally divides God from the creature. It ensures that while everything can be communicated to the creature cannot possess the immortal ground of life in itself. It's the source of divine uniqueness, the otherness that makes God God. Without this irreducible core, there would be no distinct divine being, only an undifferentiated totality, which would paradoxically negate its ability to love and relate. #, the system of freedom and the general economy.
When we hear system in philosophy, we often think of something rigid, right? A closed logical structure, something you could master and neatly categorize like a meticulously organized library. But Schelling's approach, given what we've just discussed about the constantly evolving, contradictory divine life, sounds much more dynamic and fluid. How does he conceive of a system in this context? It doesn't sound static at all.
That's a crucial distinction. Schelling often spoke of the whole das Ganze and the need to think through the whole of things from beginning to end. Yet he believed the system must not be invented, but rather it can only be found as a system per se, that is, as already at hand in the divine understanding. This implies that the system isn't something we impose on reality like a blueprint we draw up.
Right.
Instead, it's something we discover within the inherent living structure of the divine itself. It's a dynamic, unfolding reality, not an abstract, static construction. Our thinking doesn't create it, but reveals it.
So thinking cannot appropriate the system, meaning we can't simply grasp and own it. Rather, thinking is the property of the system. That's a powerful shift. It means we're called to become aware of something we're already circulating within, something much larger than ourselves.
Right.
Rather than trying to build it from scratch or force it into our own categories, it's about recognizing the underlying living order of existence, which is far grander than any human conceptualization could fully capture. It demands a different posture from the philosopher, doesn't it?
Absolutely, a different posture. This understanding means that all philosophy is only a manifestation of God. That is, a continuing proof of God. The system, therefore, is inherently mobile, not static. It's like life itself, an incessant unfolding. All errors in philosophy, he says, have originated in this stalling, in the attempt to fix and freeze dynamic principles into rigid dogmas.
Stalling, like stopping the flow.
Exactly. When philosophy stops moving, when it refuses to embrace internal contradictions in development, it dies, because it loses its connection to the living primordial process. It becomes a museum piece rather than a living inquiry.
That's such a vital point. It's like a living organism which dies only what can no longer develop. An axiom isolated from this living, moving whole will die because it's severed from the center of its life. So it's not just about logical consistency, but about maintaining a vital connection to the larger dynamic process of reality. It's the difference between, I don't know, a textbook explanation and a living, evolving ecosystem.
Very well put. Schelling famously states, each axiom is false outside the system. Only in the system, in the organic context of the living whole, is there a truth. This mobility of the system is the life of divine disequilibrium. It's a continuous affirmation of being's incessant natality and fatality, a constant beginning and end. This is a system that affirms internal difference and conflict as essential for its vitality, rather than seeking to erase them. It's a system that's always in flux, always becoming, perpetually balancing and rebalancing its internal forces.
Okay, so where does this dynamic system, this living whole, originate? Schelling uses a fascinating, almost paradoxical term to describe its ultimate source, the ungrunde Grund, the non-ground of ground. It sounds incredibly abstract, almost like a riddle. What's the core, truly surprising takeaway here for someone trying to understand ultimate reality?
Well, the key insight here is that this non-ground is not an absence or a void, like a blank slate. Instead, it's the very source of divine luxuriance, the non-source of source itself. It precedes all ground, indicating something primordial that cannot be fully captured or defined by conventional terms of origin or causation.
Okay, so not emptiness, but potential.
More than potential. Think of it like the deep ocean. It's not empty, but so incredibly vast and formless that it defies easy categorization, yet it's the source of immense life and power. It's the unconditioned, the ungraspable origin from which all being, all movement, and all systems flow. It's the mystery that enables all manifestation without itself being a definable entity. Is prior to all distinctions, including the distinction between being and non-being. It's what allows for the possibility of anything at all.
That's a much clearer way to visualize it. Thank you. And the text also contrasts a general economy with a restricted economy when discussing the system. What's the significance here for understanding this dynamic philosophical approach and perhaps even our own human approaches to life?
Right. The system of freedom, or the general economy, is dynamic, expanding, and contracting, always holding itself back even in its exhaling, maintaining a mobile equilibrium. It embraces the full spectrum of its internal tensions, allowing for continuous growth and movement.
Okay, the general economy is dynamic.
Yes. A restricted economy, on the other hand, is marked by egoism. It's unable to maintain a dynamic relationship to its own restrictions, to its own internal tensions. It clots, becomes ossified, trying to cling to one pole of existence. This leads to philosophical errors and a kind of death in thinking, because it tries to assert individual moments or isolated axioms as sovereign, severing them from the living whole. It's a failure to embrace the necessary contradictions of life, much like someone who only ever wants to inhale but never exhale.
That's a great analogy. This deep dive into the system and its internal dynamics also helps us understand Schelling's place in philosophical history, doesn't it? Especially his critique of his predecessors and contemporaries. He wasn't just building his own system in a vacuum. He was actively responding to what he saw as fundamental errors that had plagued modern thought.
Indeed. He sees modern philosophy as diverging significantly from its origins. For instance, Descartes. Descartes lacerated the world into body and spirit, completely rending the living interrelation of things and losing unity.
Right, the mind-body split.
Exactly. Spinoza, while attempting to unify them, created a dead substance, an immobile parity, thereby losing duality and dynamic conflict. Leibniz transformed everything into representation, denying the actual existence of bodies, making even God merely the highest power of representation, not a living force. Fichte, with his emphasis on the I, the ego, focused solely on human power of representation, ignoring the principle that resists thinking, the stubborn reality external to the self.
So Schelling views this entire lineage as a coherent and logically consistent further development of one and the same fundamental error, an idealization and emptying of concepts. He believes these philosophies stripped concepts, including God, of their living forces and their essential connection to nature, reducing them to abstract, lifeless forms. He's trying to inject life, dynamism, and, well, realism back into philosophy by reestablishing those primordial connections.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Schelling believes these modern systems lead to a dangerous dissolution, where the world would actually already be dissolved into nothing. If everything is just representation or abstract concept, then reality loses its tangible, resisting force. He insists on a principle which resists thinking, a stubborn, irreducible reality that cannot be simply absorbed by thought or representation. Without this principle, the world would merely evaporate into concepts, like trying to grasp smoke.
This insuperable center is what he calls the eternal force of God, a force that resists revelation and is contrary to the creature. This is the real might in God, which, as we discussed earlier, relates directly to God's personality, that incommunicable, irreducible aspect of the divine that can't be fully rationalized or appropriated. It's the wild, untamed core.
Yes, exactly. And he provocatively calls this the barbaric principle. Yes, which, when overcome but not annihilated, is the foundation of all greatness and beauty. This principle is raw. It resists being tamed by reason, and yet its very resistance is what gives rise to everything profound and beautiful. He explicitly links this to the ancient wisdom that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, emphasizing realism's priority over idealism. It's a profound reverence for a power that precedes and exceeds our understanding, a power that must be acknowledged, engaged with, and overcome in a specific sense, integrated into the whole, rather than ignored or rationalized away. It's recognizing the profound depth and even potential terror that lies beneath the surface of all existence. #, time, consciousness, and revelation in the divine life.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Schelling has a truly unique perspective on time. It's far from a simple linear progression of past, present, future. He sees it not as an abstract container for events, but as a living tension, an active dynamic force inherent to reality. How does he articulate this vibrant view of time?
Well, he states, the past is known, the present is discerned, the future is intimated. And this intimation, ahnung of the future, is incredibly significant. It's not just a guess or a prediction. It's the lost and irrecoverable ground of the past, suggesting itself as what is still to come, but in such a way that its coming does not preserve the present, but rather overturns it.
Overturns it.
Yes. Think of it like a distant echo from a deep past that suddenly, unexpectedly, reconfigures your entire understanding of where you are now and where you're going. The future holds the potential to radically reconfigure our understanding of the present and the past, not just extending them.
That's fascinating. This isn't just a philosophical concept. It deeply resonates with our own human experience of memory and anticipation, doesn't it? But on a cosmic scale, our understanding of history, and indeed of our own lives, is constantly being reshaped by what we anticipate, what we hope for, or what we fear. It's like a continuous living reinterpretation of existence itself, where the past isn't simply over, but still dynamically influencing the present and the future.
For Schelling, this dynamism extends to every individual thing. Each has an inner time of its own, inborn and indwelling within it. He fundamentally critiques Kantianism for delimiting time as merely a form of our representations, a way our minds structure experience.
Right, just a mental construct.
For Schelling, it's more. Time is not just how we perceive the world, but an inherent active quality of existence itself, present in every individual thing, every molecule, every being. It's a dynamic, inhaling and exhaling, contracting and expanding, systolic and diastolic force. Time, for him, is life itself, not merely a framework within which life unfolds.
So time isn't just an external dimension. It's an inherent pulsating force that is unique to each thing, an internal rhythm that connects it to the larger cosmic movements. This makes the universe feel incredibly alive, infused with its own temporality, its own internal clockwork. It's as if everything is breathing, expanding, and contracting in its own temporal dance.
And the concept of eternity is also radically redefined in this light. True eternity does not exclude all time, but rather contains time, eternal time, subjugated within itself, its actual eternity as the overcoming of time, similar to how the Hebrew word nagzak means both victory and eternity.
Victory and eternity.
Yes, this isn't a timeless spaces, a frozen moment outside of all duration. Instead, it's a dynamic victory over the limitations of sequential time, a mastery of all temporal moments within a higher living unity.
This means that in God there's a succession that is actual, and hence not one that has happened in time, but an included time within eternity itself. So God's eternity isn't empty or abstract. It contains and masters time, making it a living, dynamic eternity, a grand narrative that is always unfolding yet always contained.
Exactly. Now, moving to consciousness, Schelling suggests that an eternal being conscious cannot be imagined, or it would be the same as unconsciousness. Pure knowledge, while essential to God as the highest being, is not yet that which knows of itself. It's a potential, an infinite capacity for knowledge, but not yet a fully actualized, self-aware consciousness. For something to know, it needs an object of knowledge, even if that object is itself.
Okay, so for God's highest being to truly be what has being, and for pure knowledge to know itself, it needs a relation to something else that is being to it. This elevates it to actus, to active realization. Consciousness, even divine consciousness, requires a kind of self-differentiation, a reflection against something distinct from itself to become fully manifest and self-aware. It's a profound idea that consciousness isn't merely existence, but an active, reflective relationship.
This brings us naturally to revelation. The idea of God revealing itself through being is not a mere necessity, as if God were compelled. It's a free and divine decision. God retains the power to determine the, so to speak, time and hour of this revelation. This is crucial for maintaining God's absolute freedom. God is not compelled to reveal, but chooses to at a moment, determined by its own internal dynamics, not external pressure.
This challenges that common, almost flippant question, what kept God busy before God created the world? Schelling says God was not simply idle, sitting in timeless waiting. Wisdom, which he sees as God's favorite, was in and around God, a cause of God's joy, beholding the entire future history, the great image of the world and all its events in advance and through her. So there is a dynamic inner life and vision happening even before overt creation, a kind of eternal pre-vision.
Yes, an inner fullness. And this leads to a subtle but profound point about the divine past. If one cannot imagine a present that is not founded on a past, then there can be no eternal present that is not based on an eternal past. This means that God's eternal presence necessarily implies an eternal past within God, a primordial history of divine unfolding.
So for Schelling, God has being from eternity. But this implies that the scission, that crucial separation and distinction within God we talked about, that primordial state of contradiction, that life of obsession and craving, likewise happened from eternity. The primordial state of contradiction, that wildfire, is posited as the past by the supernatural being of freedom. It's not a historical event in time, but an eternal unfolding within the divine essence itself, shaping what is to come. It's the groundwork of all becoming.
Precisely. Now, Schelling argues that modern philosophy has often torn off the thread of spiritual and doctrinal tradition, leading to an ignorance of concepts. He finds invaluable insight by turning to ancient traditions, especially the Old Testament, to understand these primordial beginnings of the divine. He sees it as a profound repository of original concepts and intuitions that modern, overly rationalistic thought has lost or misinterpreted.
He sees the unity in duality and duality in unity as essential to divine individuality, something lost in modern pure religion of reason, which tries to strip God of all living forces and nature, reducing the divine to a simplistic, abstract principle. He points to the two names for God in the Old Testament, Elohim and Jehovah, which beautifully embody this inherent duality within unity.
Let's break those down quickly. Elohim, a plural word, indicates the divine substance, all the primordial forces, a vast, inexpressible totality, raw, divine power. Jehovah, in contrast, is the name of Elohim, the expressing, pure breath, pure spirit, but without actual combination, without a fully formed conscious intention yet. Elohim represents the divine effects, the unformed totality of power, while Jehovah is the active, expressive aspect, the unfolding spirit. This illustrates God's complex individuality, this unity in duality, which is not a simple multiplicity, but an internal dynamic distinction that allows for manifestation.
And here's a fascinating detail he picks up on that really shows his deep engagement with these texts. The Hebrew name for God, the tetragrammaton YHWH, has silent letters and implies 4 stages of progression. Schelling notes that Pythagoras must have known one simply must count to 4 because nothing comes to continuance without entering into the 4 stages of progression. He even cites the Pythagorean oath, by the one who delivers to our soul the tetractes, the fount of eternally flowing nature, to emphasize the fourfold as the highest continuance of God and eternal nature. It's like a cosmic blueprint for manifestation.
It is like a blueprint. And moving to creation itself, Schelling makes a critical distinction in the Old Testament, one often overlooked. The word for create, bara, in Genesis 1.1, he argues, signifies unfree, unconscious creating, driven by power and might, without intellect or conscious intention. This is the primordial, almost automatic outpouring of divine force.
Unconscious creating.
Yes. This contrasts sharply with later words in Genesis, like form or make, hor, which imply conscious production and shaping. This distinction is crucial for understanding the chaotic and void state of the earth after that initial creation mentioned in Genesis 1.1. It wasn't a perfect immediate creation, but a primordial unconscious unfolding that left a state of chaos, a formless energy waiting for further development.
So what does this all mean for the modern reader, or for someone simply trying to grasp these deep truths? The Old Testament, far from being outdated or merely historical narrative, provides the beginnings, the first great points of that system that modern philosophy has often ignored or misinterpreted. Schelling suggests it offers vital keys to understanding the primordial processes and inherent mysteries of the divine life and the cosmos, encoded in ancient wisdom. It's like a spiritual archaeology. #tag the three forces and the formation of the world.
So we've explored the necessary annular drive within God, this ceaseless circulation of forces, always beginning, always consuming itself and giving birth. But how does this eternal self-enclosed movement, this divine clockwork, lead to actual existence? To the world as we know it, how does it break out rather than just remaining a perpetual internal cycle? This is the grand transition from divine necessity to freedom, from pure potential to concrete, observable reality.
And Schelling argues that true existence, the actual world, comes only when the three principles, the negating, affirming, and their unity communally and voluntarily sacrifice, being that which has being, and hence debase themselves into simple being. This isn't a forced act, but a voluntary self-limitation, a collective surrender of their individual claims to absolute being.
That's the idea.
This act terminates their reciprocal exclusion, allowing them to enter into its potency, and crucially, it opens up space. This is the moment where the internal divine dynamic becomes manifest as a world, almost like a self-imposed humility giving birth to reality.
Exactly. This transforms the blind necessity of reciprocal inexistence, where the principles endlessly exclude each other in a primal tension, into a free belonging together. The dark, inscrutable, and inexpressible being that was God's primordial nature becomes the all, the totality of the world. And it happens through a subjugation incision that does not happen once and for all, but in a moment that is eternally, always, and still happening. It's a continuous act of creation and self-revelation. The world is not created and then left, but is in a constant state of being created, a perpetual unfolding of the divine into concrete form.
Okay, so what's the role of nature in this unfolding? Schelling uses an intriguing analogy from Plato's Symposium, portraying nature as panenia, poverty, or need. This seems counterintuitive if nature is part of divine plenitude and the goal of God's self-revelation. How does poverty relate to divine richness?
Well, Pygenia, despite her external poverty, shut away divine plenitude within her. She couldn't reveal it until she united with Poros, wealth, excess himself. Their bastard child was Eros, born under the form and, so to speak, press of that originary negation. So nature, seemingly lacking or impoverished, actually contains the divine fullness, but it's initially overwhelmed by the night, needing development, union, and liberation to reveal its true content.
Oh, okay.
This negating force, this Pygenia, is the mother and wet nurse of the entire world, and paradoxically the ground of all revelation. It's not a static lack, but an active, creative lack, a yearning that drives development.
So nature, with all its seeming deficiencies and limitations, actually holds the potential for divine fullness, but it's held back by this initial night or negating force. It needs to be developed and liberated. This cosmic dance, as you put it, implies a constant dynamic within nature itself, reflecting the internal dynamics of the divine. It's like a veiled potential waiting to be unveiled.
Indeed. The entire cosmos, Schelling asserts, is like a swelling heart of the Godhead that continues, retained by invisible forces, in a continuous pulsation, or in an alternation of expansion and contraction. This is the systole and diastole we mentioned earlier, the fundamental rhythm of life, not just within living organisms, but on a grand cosmic scale. It's the universe breathing, a gigantic living organism animated by these internal tensions.
And this isn't just a metaphor either, is it? He sees it manifested in celestial bodies like comets, which, in their approach and retreat from the sun, show alternating expansions and contractions, dissolving and reforming. They are like living witnesses to that primordial time of fiery electrical dissolution, reflecting the ceaseless internal struggle and transformation of the cosmos. Their eccentric paths symbolize the unreconciled forces at play, always seeking, always changing. It's a macroscopic dance of contraction and expansion.
Yes, a physical manifestation. And returning to the theme of suffering and pain, Schelling emphasizes that everything that becomes can only become a discontent. Just as anxiety is the fundamental sensation of every living creature, so everything that lives is only conceived and born in violent struggle. This is not a peaceful unfolding. From the smallest organism to the grandest cosmic formation, Genesis is always accompanied by struggle and pain. Think of a seed pushing through hard ground or a caterpillar breaking out of its chrysalis life demands effort and tension.
And this applies to the universe itself. The mountains of the primordial world, the oldest formations of the human spirit, all show a character of closure and contraction. Creation is not a peaceful unfolding, but a violent revulsion. Even the individual center of gravity in a comet, he points out, is not reconciled with the universal center of gravity, leading to its eccentric path. This inner struggle, this loathing and anxiety, is essential for anything to come into being and maintain its distinctiveness. It's the universe experiencing its own birth pangs.
Absolutely. The diversity of nature, then, isn't from peaceful exemplacy, a harmonious, effortless fusion, but from discontent. The products of inorganic nature, he suggests, are manifestly the children of anxiety, of terror, nay, of despair.
Children of despair. Strong words.
They are. This highlights the inherent struggle within creation, where conflicting forces are not dissolved, but are held in a dynamic tension that gives rise to all forms. The rough edges, the jagged mountains, the volatility of elements, these are not imperfections, but expressions of this primordial strife.
This struggle means that when forces are gathered, they are in inherent contradiction, unable to rest. This leads to a rotary movement where matter itself shatters into individual and independent centers that also rotate. It's a dynamic, even violent birthing process, constantly seeking a new equilibrium but never quite finding a static repose. It's truly a universe born in creative chaos, continually spinning into new forms.
Schelling also offers a radical view of space, challenging the idea of it as an indifferent void, an empty container into which things are simply placed. Instead, the force that really posits space is the universal primordial force that contracts the whole. Space is not a pre-existing emptiness, but an active product of divine contraction, of the divine drawing in upon itself.
That's a huge departure from, say, Newtonian space. So, if this contracting force were to cease, there would be no space. This means space isn't empty. It's organically in the whole and in the particulars. There's a true above and below, a heaven that is veritably above the earth, and a spirit world that is properly understood beyond nature. This elevates space from a mere geometric concept to an active, meaningful dimension of existence, imbued with divine purpose and alive with forces. It's a truly embodied space.
And what's fascinating here is that this finitude of the world on the outside contains a consummate infinity on the inside. It's the goal of God to reveal himself spatially or in a place as well as temporally, making corporeality, the material world, the goal of the ways of God.
Yeah.
This suggests that the physical realm is not a lesser creation or an illusion, but a purposeful manifestation of the divine, a necessary stage in its self-revelation, a vessel for infinity.
So how does the spiritual relate to the material in this dynamic universe? Is matter just an inert substance, or does it participate in this spiritual unfolding and transformation?
Matter, particularly in the organic world, is seen as mere appearance, a deferred image of the essence that really lies at the basis. Bodies are clothing or masks that hide an inner point of transfiguration.
Masks.
Yes. This means that the material world, even in its most concrete forms, is not just what it seems. It's a manifestation of something deeper and more spiritual. A visible sign of an invisible essence, always hinting at its true, more luminous nature.
This spiritual corporeal being is an intermediary substance, a mitigated being of light, where the severe, obscuring force is overcome by softness and engulfed in light. It's like the splendor of glory that forms the outermost aura of the invisible Godhead. It suggests a continuum where matter is not separate from spirit, but a lower manifestation of it, always striving towards a higher, more luminous state, gradually shedding its opacity.
Exactly. And this perspective gives new meaning to the ancient art of alchemy. It's not just about turning lead into gold externally, as a simplistic physical process. Schelling understands it on a much deeper, universal level, as a metaphor for cosmic transformation.
True alchemy, then, is a constant alchemy that happens within nature and within us. It's about when beauty, truth, or the good are liberated from the attached darkness or impurity and appear in their purity. The alchemists sought the gold of gold for what makes gold into gold, which is far more general than just a physical metal. They were searching for the essence of perfection, the process of purification and transfiguration, seeing beyond the superficial.
That's the core idea. This belief in the general capacity of matter, again, to be elevated into spiritual qualities is constant across ages. It suggests that through gradual overcoming of the obscuring potency, the less precious can be transformed into the more precious. It's a vision of matter as an active participant in a cosmic process of refinement and spiritualization, moving from initial contraction and obscurity toward light and revelation, always striving for its goal of gold. We began with this striking idea of divine morning, Traurigkeit, as the single right and happy state of the soul. How does this profound concept of a suffering growing God, this acceptance of internal tension, connect to our inner lives, to our own ethical and spiritual path as humans? What does this mean for us? Well, Schelling claims the single right and happy state of the soul is the divine morning in which all earthly pain is immersed. This isn't morbid or pessimistic, quite the contrary. It's an invitation to a state of profound empathy and participation in the cosmic process. It implies that to truly connect with the divine, one must embrace, rather than shun, the experience of pain and difficulty, understanding it not as an end, but as a path to something higher, a necessary stage for growth and self-transcendence. It's about finding meaning, and even a strange form of joy and sorrow, as it links us to the deepest rhythms of existence.
And the soul itself, in Schelling's view, isn't just the essence of a thing, a static identity. He describes it as the deformative force indwelling within all form, the excess of the form within the form, a Dionysian force that squanders its force beyond the ego's capacity to preserve itself. That sounds like a powerful, almost wild force that actively works against fixed boundaries and individualistic self-preservation.
It truly is. This means the soul is not the principle of individuality in a narrow egoistic sense, but that through which one is lifted beyond all selfhood, and through which one becomes capable of sacrifice of oneself, of selfless love, and of contemplation and knowledge of the essence of things, and with this, of art. It's the force that breaks us out of egoistic self-preservation, enabling profound creativity, deep connection to the universal, and genuine empathy.
So without
this soul, without great and general enthusiasm, there are only sects, only narrow self-serving groups. It's a call to move beyond egoistic self-preservation towards a selfless, expansive engagement with being, art, and genuine community.
So how do we approach this truth, this dynamic, contradictory reality within ourselves and in the world? Schelling distinguishes between what he calls the theoretical eye and the spiritual eye. These sound like two fundamentally different ways of knowing or perceiving. What makes them so distinct?
The theoretical eye is a form of egoism. It strives to find the truth in things, taking refuge in the work's hypertrophic status as a thing, and partitioning the results of its gaze as the truth and the good. It seeks to master, categorize, and possess knowledge, often reducing dynamic processes to static concepts. It's detached, analytical, and ultimately limits its own understanding by dissecting and fixing, missing the living essence. It tries to control rather than experience.
Okay, the controlling eye. In contrast, the spiritual eye affirms the advent of divine fecundity within the grace and beauty of things. It sees a prodigality that does not hold the future in reserve, but rather releases it to the non-precalculable advent of freedom's grace. This sounds like a more open, intuitive, and receptive way of knowing, one that embraces the unpredictable and the overflowing nature of existence. It sees the continuous unfolding of divine creativity in the world, not as something to be captured, but to be witnessed and affirmed. It's a mode of awe rather than acquisition.
Precisely, a mode of awe. And even seemingly negative concepts like evil and sickness find a place in this dynamic system, not as mere absences, but as active though distorted forms of being. Sickness is a life, albeit only a false life, a life that does not have being, but that wants to elevate itself from not being to being. It's a distorted striving, a life that lacks its true ground but exerts its own misguided force. Think of a cancer cell. It is life, but life gone awry, striving to grow, but in a destructive manner.
And evil is likewise understood not as a pure absence, but as an inner lie, and lacks all true being. Yet it is, and it shows a terrible actuality, not as something that truly has being, but as that which by nature has being endeavoring to be. This means evil isn't just nothing. It's a striving, a distorted, misdirected life, a force that actively tries to elevate itself into being, creating its own grim actuality. This is a profound take on the nature of evil, not as a void, but as an active, albeit false, manifestation of the primordial will, constantly trying to assert itself where it doesn't belong.
It's a challenging idea. This journey into the primordial depths of God, with its inherent contradictions and struggles, reveals a side of the divine that can be unsettling, even terrifying. The Godhead sits enthroned over a world of terrors. This isn't meant to simply scare us, but to acknowledge a powerful, even frightening aspect of the divine that simplistic, purely benevolent views often overlook. It's the raw, untamed power at the core of existence.
So God, in what is concealed in and by God, could be called the awful and the terrible, not in a derivative fashion, but in their original sense. This isn't to invoke fear for fear's sake, but to acknowledge a profound aspect of the divine nature that is often overlooked. It's the ungraspable, untamed, primordial power at the core of existence, which is the source of both creation and potential dissolution. It's the deep, unyielding ground of being.
And one of Schelling's guiding principles, drawn from what he called the old hypocrites, likely a reference to ancient esoteric traditions, is that everything divine is human, and everything human is divine. He says this is the key to the greatest discoveries in the realm of God and nature. This profound unity suggests a deep resonance between our inner experience and the grand cosmic drama, a mirroring of macrocosm and microcosm.
This invites us to look inward to understand the cosmos, then, as one who could write completely the history of their own life would also have, in a small epitome, concurrently grasped the history of the cosmos. Our own experiences of struggle, growth, joy, and sorrow are miniature reflections of the universe's own unfolding, offering profound insights if we pay attention. Our inner world is the key to the outer world.
A powerful connection. Finally, he reiterates that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Again, this fear isn't about terror or subjugation, but a profound respect, an awe for the ancient and holy force of being that must be acknowledged, even if it is overcome in itself to give way to love. It's a recognition of the sheer raw power of the primordial, which must be integrated, not denied or merely intellectualized. It's a humble acceptance of the vast mystery.
And this links back to realism's priority over idealism. You want evolution without the involution that preceded it if you ignore this principle. The greatest glory of development is not expected from what easily unfolds. It is expected from what has been excluded and which only decides to unfold with opposition. It's the struggle against resistance, the overcoming of what is barbaric and awful, that truly gives rise to greatness and beauty. It's in the confrontation with the deepest, most difficult aspects of existence that true revelation occurs. #tag rediscovering the spirit of Schelling.
Our journey through Schelling has been about more than just summarizing facts or intellectual propositions. Schelling himself believed that true learning requires a sure and living feeling for discoveries, not just mastery of external details. He understood that the deepest truths aren't simply intellectual concepts, but living forces that must be intuited and experienced, resonating with our whole being.
He suggests that his own text, Die Weltalter, works against its own letter, endeavoring to intimate the invisible and inaudible within the rigorous orders of the text's own visibility and audibility. That's a fascinating challenge to the reader, isn't it? It means we're called to read the unwritable and follow the hidden trace of nature, seeking the spirit and life behind the words rather than just the literal meaning. It's an invitation to a deeper form of engagement, a mystical reading, if you will, where the text itself points beyond its own form.
Exactly. This rediscovery of the spirit requires what he calls a spiritual eye, something distinct from the theoretical gaze. This eye penetrates the exterior and feels the active force in it, glimpsing the unprethinkable future in a thing, its inherent creative life and power to exist. It's an intuitive faculty that perceives the dynamic core of things, the potential for becoming, rather than just what is manifest. It's seeing beyond the surface to the living pulse beneath.
And it senses the sublimity of freedom through the proxy of the beautiful, specifically in the pain of form. We must go through the form in order to gain it back as intelligible, alive, and as truly felt. We don't bypass form. Instead, we engage with its inherent tensions and struggles, its limitations, and even its suffering to access the spiritual life within. It's through the annihilation of form, not its destruction, but its transcendence or suspension, that we glimpse the highest beauty, a beauty that defies determinate measurement. It's like experiencing a profound work of art, where the constraints of the medium somehow reveal something boundless.
Beautifully put. Schelling delves deeply into the profound relationship between language and silence. He says the word falls in love with its anterior silence. This isn't just a poetic phrase. It describes the origin of language itself from a deeper, unspoken ground, a primordial silence that precedes and gives birth to all expression.
And what's truly profound is that spirit, in its greatest intensity, it grows silent, verstumped. This isn't mere muteness or an inability to speak, but a discourse falling in love with always being underway toward its own inherent silence. A silence that speaks louder than words, but which can only be approached, but never attained, through words. Language, he suggests, attempts to say the unsayable, constantly striving towards the ineffable, always gesturing beyond itself, always returning to the wellspring of silence from which it emerged. It's a continuous, dynamic striving.
This approach to knowledge, then, is not about concepts that can be fully grasped and defined, but about intimations, Anang. As we discussed earlier with time, the future is intimated. This intimation is the lost and irrecoverable ground of the past, suggesting itself as what is still to come, but in such a way that its coming does not preserve the present, but rather overturns it. It's a profound way of understanding how our experience of the past can paradoxically shape and even revolutionize our perception of what's yet to come, without simply repeating it. It's a sensing of deep underlying currents rather than a mere prediction of events.
Finally, in rediscovering Schelling, we must not shy away from what might seem barbaric or even offensive to modern sensibilities. The very foundation of all greatness and beauty, he argues, lies in this barbaric principle, the force in God that resists thinking and revelation, the real might, that unyielding, irreducible core. It's the untamed, raw power that precedes all order.
Exactly. It's this raw, powerful, and ultimately incommunicable aspect of the divine that, when overcome but not annihilated, when integrated rather than suppressed, allows for the dynamic unfolding of life, freedom, and the entire cosmos. It's the recognition that true wisdom involves confronting the deepest, most unsettling truths about the nature of being, rather than softening them into comforting abstractions. It's the wildness at the heart of the world, essential for its vitality. #outro.
So we've explored Schelling's vision of a profoundly dynamic God, not a static, distant entity, but one eternally engaged in a cosmic dance of necessity and freedom, affirmation and negation, suffering, glory. We've seen how contradiction is the very engine of life, how time is an internal force, and how even matter yearns for spiritual transfiguration, participating in a constant universal alchemy. It's a universe brimming with tension, struggle, and, well, immense potential.
What's truly striking, I think, is Schelling's insistence that this isn't just abstract philosophy, but the very essence of how the world, and indeed our own inner lives, operate. If, as he says, the true prime matter of all life and existence is precisely what is horrifying, what might that mean for our understanding of beauty, joy, and the creative spirit in ourselves and in the world around us? It certainly makes you think about the hidden struggles that precede all glory, and the profound wisdom that can be found in embracing tension.
Absolutely. This deep dive into Schelling certainly leaves us with much to ponder. What stands out to you from this exploration of a dynamic God, where suffering is a path to glory and contradiction is the fountain of eternal life? How might these ideas change your perspective on the hidden forces at play in your own life and in the universe? Keep seeking, keep questioning, and join us next time for another deep dive.